Welcome to the C-Suite podcast with me, Russell Goldsmith, and Graham Barrett. We are here at Money20 Las Vegas.
We're producing these episodes in partnership with Atomic, a leading embedded financial connectivity platform.
We are going to be interviewing a number of the speakers and attendees from the event, and we really hope you enjoy the show. So I'm now joined by Rich Clow, the Managing Director, Head of Innovation and Strategy for Global Payment Solutions at Bank of America. Rich, that is a bit of a long job title, so why don't we start by you just explaining exactly what that involves?
Thank you very much, Russell. So really what it involves is we have structured ourselves in a way where payment solutions cuts across all of our client segments globally. So I have the opportunity to look at new innovative solutions that solve everything from our single checking account clients' needs all the way up to our most complex global corporates in what we do day to day.
Great. Now let's pick up on the innovation part of that job title. What can you tell us about some of the innovations that Bank of America is driving, particularly in the payment space?
Certainly. So I think there are really two things I'd like to highlight. One is we are really advocating for how we move forward as an ecosystem and an industry on real-time payments. And it's been quite a journey. You know, there are over 30 markets around the world that have it. In the United States, because of our franchise having both scaled consumer, small business, and corporates, we're really leaning in on how do we enable requests for payment, how do we start to scale those solutions, and we're starting to see some promising results, but it's still a bit of a ways off. And then secondly, there are two different kinds of client challenges, like I mentioned. One is for our consumers and small businesses, we realized about 2 years ago that there's a significant amount of money flows for cross-border payments going to smaller solution providers. And we identified that part of it was we didn't have a mobile wires solution. We didn't have clear and transparent ways that they could understand FX versus USD. And lastly, it wasn't in Spanish. So we've gone through a journey to really address what we think is a best-of-breed experience, and because of that experience, we've actually been able to retain a very significant amount of our clients, and actually almost 25% after only 5 months of all our digital wires are using the mobile wires solution.
Now, one of the things I want to talk to you about, and I can see them just clearly over the other side of the hall here, is
Yep.
Pays, because that's obviously something that you're working across. What specific problem is Pays actually trying to solve? And also, why does it matter?
Sure. So Pays is really started by the owner banks of early warning. So Bank of America is one of the 7. And it started with a very basic question about what could we do for cardholders who do not use wallets today, as well as what could we do to support merchants who have a significant number of clients using guest checkout. And Pays is really meant to address a person going to a site, not wanting to have to key enter in all their data, which often results in a declined transaction, because if you're 1 digit off on your zip code or your address or your card, it doesn't work. And then secondly, clients didn't really, when we pulled them, they don't really want to have to store passwords at many different merchants, particularly ones that they go to infrequently. So Pays is set up to address those things, where the data will be pre-enrolled on behalf of the client, so it'll have your basic name, email, phone number, and address, as well as eligible cards. Clients get the option to enroll through either the bank that they choose to work with or through the checkout process with Pays. And then it will securely identify or confirm who you are. It lets you select your card. And then for subsequent transactions, all you'll need is a one-time passcode for checkout. So we're really adding security as well as convenience for guest checkout.
Yeah, that sounds great. Any other trends and innovations that you see, particularly within the embedded finance space?
Yeah, I mean, embedded finance is kind of interesting because it all started with the moment when Uber never asked for your credit card, right? A consumer or a business traveler would just step out of the car, they get an alert, okay, your experience has been paid. And what we're seeing now more and more is not just the business model evolve, but treasurers in major corporations all over the world and even small businesses saying, hey, margins are getting really thin. What can I do, or what kind of tools could I use in order to enable expanding our margins and profitability of our business? So we're seeing really clever ways that people are looking to gain insights to their working capital. So we have something called Cash Pro is our digital channel. And we've built in some tools using machine learning and AI, because you have to have AI in every podcast. to help people with cash flow forecasting and working capital. But then there are other really basic tools like how can I do liquidity pooling? How can I evaluate guaranteed FX rates in order to kind of hedge my risk and perhaps lock in better rates over a longer tenure? So those are some things that I think are kind of looking at embedding payments as a part of a P&L driver instead of just something that needs to fulfill the business goal.
I need to pick up on the AI comment there, because you're absolutely right. It does come up in pretty much every interview we do. How do you guys keep on top of the speed of development of it?
Well, I think that for us, our intent is just to continue to identify what problems or pain points do our clients have. How do we look to really understand and deepen those pain points? And if we solve them, would it be good for them and us? And then AI is one of many tools. We have a pretty rigorous process, and we see things like, how can I compile the right notes to go meet with a medium-sized enterprise across the 6 or 7 different repositories of data, where again, the machine can pull that together, but we still need a human to review it and ultimately put more of the editorial and make sure that it's accurate.
Of course. Now, another big topic, as well as AI, I think is discussed here, is open banking. Always, a big thing here at Money20. What's your take on how this is going to transform the financial landscape?
So I'm not really sure it's going to transform as much as evolve, right? Because if you think about it, in the UK and EMEA, PSD2 drove a lot of standards and a lot of great data, must-dos for both banks as well as users of the data, but it hasn't exploded in terms of pay by bank, and we have a partnership where we enable that there now. And in the United States, we're kind of scratching our heads a little. There are actually too many ways to pay, right? A consumer, whether you're paying your credit card, whether you're paying your power bill, or whether you're buying something at checkout, figuring out where does pay by bank fit in there is a little bit of a head scratcher to a standard, not a payment nerd, right? A standard consumer at home. So we think that a lot of it's going to be experimentation. You saw Walmart make an announcement about doing some things with Fiserv, using their user experience. I think that as merchants stand the opportunity to gain the most, I think that you're going to see some incentives. I think you're going to see some drives for why a consumer would change the way they pay, because moreover, it's not really broken right now. We really enjoy where we are in the payments ecosystem. We get to work globally. We get to work with small companies, big companies, including fintechs. And really, our whole intent is just how can we figure out how to safely scale these solutions and provide choice.
That's great. Listen, Rich, Clow, really good to talk to you. Really appreciate you coming to join us on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me, Russell. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Joining me now is Natalie Talpas, who is EVP, Group Manager, Senior Digital and Payments at PNC. Natalie, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. So you've had a pretty busy Money 2020 so far, haven't you? You had this session yesterday all around open banking, which we're really keen to hear about, obviously with the recent regulation, the Dodd-Frank Act. This is a hot topic at Money 2020.
Yes, it is.
Along with a few others. So tell me about that talk first. Who was on the panel? How did it go down, etc.?
Sure. Yeah, it was great. It was one of the first sessions of the day yesterday on, as you mentioned, the open banking track. It included myself, Paul LaRusso from Akoya, and Nicole Elam from the National Bankers Association. And it was a good talk about perspectives on, certainly the final rule, 1033 came out last week. So we talked a little bit about that. And also just, how do we think about bank's perspective in terms of taking advantage of it and creating enriching experiences for our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dig a bit deeper into the Act then and get some of your thoughts on what the implications of it are and possibly the opportunities it presents, more importantly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the things that in my comments I reminded folks on is all of the progress that the industry has made already in the space. With Financial Data Exchange, FDX, the industry group that manages the technology specification. There's over 90 million accounts that are already connected, and where customers are permissioning data. FDX has over 200 members. There's lots of changes happening there as well that are exciting to support this movement forward. So lots of progress already to date. The final rule, finally here, right? I think lots of expectations on what it would include based on what we saw at this time last year. I think it was the Wednesday of Money 2020 last year when Chopra and the team dropped the proposed rule. I appreciated getting a little bit of an advance notice this time around. So that was helpful. But the rule really bolsters what the the progress in the industry has already been, right? It starts to level the playing ground. It creates a path forward for data providers or other banks or and also kind of new to the data provider space, bank wallets, buy now, pay later providers, starts to create a path for them to create ways for their customers to permission, their data securely. So there's some good things. I think there's still some elements that are missing. I talked about that yesterday as well. In particular, there isn't an outright deadline or ban of screen scraping, the practice of user credential sharing. It's not good. All of us in the industry agree it's not good. Unfortunately,
why wasn't that included then? If everyone in the industry thinks it was good,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think you can certainly speculate. I know that there's an acknowledgement of there are smaller organizations that it's going to take some time, and that's why I think we saw in the final rule an acknowledgement of that in the compliance timeframe that they laid out for data providers. And so when you think about the smaller organizations, the dependencies they have on, and Nicole talked about this yesterday in our talk, the dependencies they have on their core providers, the lack of immediate resources to focus on a challenge that they might not need to be compliant for in some time. So so it was missing screen scraping. The other point I think it fell short on was laying out clear expectations around liability. It was actually pretty silent on that, and those are two key points that I think many folks in the industry were advocating that we had hoped the CFPB would add a little bit more beef to. So.
Is it kind of like a work in progress almost, that these kind of things might get updated? We might see further regulation down the line?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I think Director Chopra has indicated that this is the first of several, right? In particular, as it relates to the covered data, how they refer to it, just including deposit account and credit account today, Reg E and Reg Z accounts. I think the expectation is that the CFPB would quickly expand the role to include other account types, investment accounts, et cetera, or other lending accounts, that many banks that have their established APIs already include that information today.
So thank you for that. That's really clear on the open banking side of things. Let's move on to account primacy, that notion where I guess everything you do is under one umbrella, one financial institution. What kind of benefits do you see that delivering to the consumer, and how is that going to play out at PNC?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that, the role, the momentum that I had described is already happening in the industry, presents opportunities, and in particular related to account primacy. I think one of the things we think about at PNC is how can we ensure that our customers understand that their accounts are secure, that it's transparent in terms of how their data is being shared. So one of the things the rule does allow them to do is, and allows us to do, is surface more detail associated with those connections so that they can come to the PNC mobile application and understand, when did I permission that data to that financial application or that other bank, and kind of okay, this is good, and there's more information about that, like who else could have access to it, what's the nature of that. So when we think about primacy, it's what other elements can we continue to build and enrich our customers' financial lives at PNC. And so I think there's opportunity to think about that as you think about this environment that Director Chopra talks about in terms of customers being able to permission access to their accounts, and ideally under the underlying intention that he's shared is to ensure that they get the best interest rates, best offers, best opportunities, perhaps more personalization in terms of the types of offers that they receive. And we're certainly excited to take advantage of those opportunities in the same way that everyone else in the ecosystem is.
Yeah. It's hard to try and sum up such a huge document, isn't it? But I guess what you're kind of alluding to there is clarity for the consumer, so that they can see their financial data, and they can make more informed decisions, maybe, I guess.
Exactly. I think some of the momentum early on in open banking in the US was sort of at the cost of a consumer not understanding fully where their data was being shared, what the risks were associated with that, and that sort of thing. And I think where we are now is, a focus on consumer education, helping consumers understand how their data could be used, right? Chopra talked a lot in the role about secondary use. And so I think bringing greater transparency, control to the consumers is going to be really, really important.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant, Nia. Thank you so much for explaining that. Natalie Talpas, thanks so much for joining me here at Money 2020.
Appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too.
So joining me now is Mike Jorgensen, the Head of Emerging Solutions and Embedded Payments at US Bank. Mike, thank you so much for taking some time to chat to us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That's great. Now, let's start right there with embedded payments. How is US Bank helping its commercial clients with embedded payment solutions?
It's really interesting to see how the market has changed. It's so much more consumer driven, especially since COVID. You have customers that are demanding that they have a more integrated experience with their payments. And if you think about like rideshare apps today, nobody wants to pay a cabbie at the very end of a ride, right? They want to do it right within the app and make sure it's a really easy experience. I can give a rating, I can say if the car was clean, and I do my payment, my tip all in one. That's what US Bank's trying to do with our customers for any of their payment experiences, which would include things within automotive. Think about insurance claims payments. It's amazing. I just had a repair done at my house, and my insurance company sent me a check in the mail 10 days after everything happened. Why couldn't I get that payment, on the day one when it happened? And the thing that's really interesting is they have an app that allows me to track the status of my claim, but it stops where payment is, and then they wait for the check to come out. So from a US Bank perspective, we work with our customers to create those really sticky experiences for their end customer so that payment is integrated where they're at. We try to do it invisible integration right within the apps and the sites that they play in.
I don't know if you're able to do this in terms of going into a bit more detail on some of those practical implications for some of those particular clients that you work with.
Absolutely. I'll give you two examples. A lot of people have brokerage accounts where they want to go out and they want to do an account-to-account funding to be able to make a buy of some stock or some mutual funds or whatever. Today in the marketplace, a lot of ACH transactions that take 2 to 3 days to clear are happening. What we're doing is working with customers like that to embed faster payments within those applications so that I can do same-day account funding using an instant payment, like a real-time payment or FedNow, and I can see access to my accounts right within their app without punching out to a different US Bank application. That's one example. Second example is you think about insurance claims, the one I just talked about. We're working with some fintech providers as well as directly with insurance companies so that when they have an app that gives me the status of my claim and I upload all my pictures, at the end of that process, I can also see the payment come right through in that app. So it's an embedded experience that creates a very differentiated and sticky consumer experience for not only the provider, whether it be a fintech or an insurance company, or for the actual overall consumer process.
Excellent. Now, what about your partner network? How does that look like? And also, how do you see that evolving over time?
That's another leg of our embedded payment solution. Okay. So we can go direct to a customer, like I talked about. We can go through a fintech and move money on behalf of. But we can also have partners that come into our connected partnership network where they can certify to all of our APIs for our different payment rails, for our reporting solutions, and use that to have an embedded experience right within their native application. It used to be back in the day that those applications would have to send out flat files and things to different banks, and you'd wait for the response. Now with our connected partnership network, you can certify on all of our real-time APIs and have all that embedded directly within your resident application.
And how else are corporates transforming their payment solutions, would you say?
Yeah, it's really interesting to see this kind of evolution happen in the marketplace. Not only are they looking at having more embedded experiences to differentiate and to create a stickier customer experience, they're also looking for how can they use the money that happens in the middle and have it happen faster. So unlike the days where a corporate would say, well, I just do business on Monday through Friday, normal business hours, and that's when my payments happen, they're looking at processes for how do I do this over the weekend, on holidays? How do I use instant payments to make sure that I can either pay out when I want and immediately, or I can wait and I can do it at the right time in the future. So these corporates are not only looking for back office efficiency in the way that payments are working for them, but they're also looking for ways that to create that end user experience for them that makes them differentiated.
Good stuff. Mike Jorgensen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Joining me now is Dee Choubey. He is the CEO of MoneyLion. Dee, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
No, not at all. No, we met at last year's show, didn't we? So
we did.
Great to have you back in the chair. Love to hear the latest updates from MoneyLion. I heard there's something new that you've just kind of launched, MoneyLion Checkout. So tell me a little bit about that. What's that all about?
Yeah, look, I think Checkout is a framework for us to really expand our marketplace. Any financial institution, whether you're originating a home loan, a credit card, or personal loan, the United States really buying financial services products from the consumer's perspective is like going to a flea market or we have the DMV here in the States where, you go from one counter to the other and you have to show your ID 5 times and basically fill out the same form multiple times. When consumers online are looking for financial products, it's a very similar experience. So we operate a marketplace with 1,200 participants. There's suppliers, there's all different types of lenders, whether they're banks, whether they're specialty finance companies, fintechs. So really creating lingua franca for the consumer to put in their application one time.
Yeah.
And then for us, MoneyLion really being the operator of the network, with their permission, of course, with their consents, of course, finding the best price for them. So that's historically where it stopped. There are a lot of people in the market that do that well. They're called lead generators. But taking it the next step, right, where the consumer in that experience actually fulfills the mortgage or the personal loan or the HELOC or the credit card. No one has been really able to nail that.
Right.
Because every financial institution, we're here at Money20, and there's tens, if not hundreds of different vendors that are providing KYC and authentication and underwriting. There is no lingua franca because every bank has their own underwriting stack, right? Every bank is doing their own work to verify that you are who you are and you're credit worthy, right? You have ability to pay, willingness to pay, skill to pay. So what we have been able to do with MoneyLion Checkout is we've been able to work with the credit bureaus, we've been able to work with folks like Plaid and Nova Credit and many others like them to actually bring the capabilities right into a centralized software.
Okay.
Where if you're a chief risk officer or a chief marketing officer at a credit union or a bank, you can go into our software and design your waterfall. You can say that, hey, the credit score has to be in this band. I want to run these 4 vendors underwriting, their KYC, their fraud checks. So when the consumer's going through the MoneyLion lead experience, they're actually, without an ounce of doubt, fulfilling that product and that experience. So what we have seen with Checkout is that 40% increases in conversion rates. So banks are getting more in consideration, high intent consumers. The consumer's getting an incredible experience. Because if you think about what's happened over the last 5-10 years after the pandemic, everyone's used to the Shopify experience. Yeah. If you want to buy a t-shirt, if you're swiping on Instagram or TikTok and you just click put my information in there, and Meta and all these companies allow you to just pre-fill.
Super easy, yeah.
It's super easy.
Yeah.
Commerce goes through. The consumer doesn't get interrupted watching their TikTok or Instagram videos. They have the shirt without going into like 4 steps on a web browser. So we're trying to bring a very similar shopping experience to financial services products with MoneyLion Checkout.
It's really interesting, isn't it? That marketplace analogy I really like. And you've really kind of outlined the key benefits both there to the consumer and the marketplace partner. What about further innovations? So, I mean, Money 2020 is all about the next thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's coming up? What do you see coming down the line? Particularly, maybe I'm thinking about areas of embedded finance, open banking.
Yeah. Look, and I've been saying this a couple times, is that artificial intelligence is underhyped in financial services. The world of agents, where an agent can negotiate your debt with a lender. Agents can basically help you get really from a more expensive product to a cheaper product.
Yeah.
I think, look, within 5 years, you'll see really large-scale financial institutions being recreated with a very different cost structure, right? The biggest cost structure in financial institutions are the people, right? And with the advancements that we're seeing in artificial intelligence, I think a lot of these revenue streams that are out there will, number one, get attacked, and number two, that if you have those revenue streams, you're going to want to try to protect them with different types of either regulatory capture. You're going to go to Washington, you're going to say, hey, regulator, help me protect this revenue stream. We see, of course, the Visas and the MasterCards, not to pick on them, but they do a lot of that. But, it's just, I'm excited about just the arc of innovation, the pace of innovation that's ahead of us because of just the advancements and the compute power and the sort of the core technologies that really underpin KYC, underwriting, cost of service, compliance, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Just finish up. What we're trying to do today is get everybody's opinion on other innovations, maybe like direct deposit switching, payment management. What kind of roles do you think they might play for financial institutions in the future?
Well, look, I think the real sea change has been this idea that consumers have their transactions across multiple different institutions. They could be your bank transactions, they could be your payroll data that sits inside of an ADP or a payroll provider. But I think the sea change has been a realization that data belongs to the consumer. and they should be able to passport that data easily through APIs or whatever method that they would like easily, right? So, we are a client of Atomic, so we like the work that they do, and there are others like them out there as well. But, I think this idea that consumers can, with one click, split their paychecks into 2 or 3 different financial institutions allows that consumer, again, in our world of embedded finance and checkout, and really to enjoy the perks. There could be rewards that are really good at 3 different banks, but because they were getting their payroll in just Chase, they were only getting Chase's rewards. But now if they split their direct deposit between MoneyLion and Chase and one other institution, then you can now really enjoy, whether it's content, whether it's education, whether it's financial literacy or rewards across multiple different platforms, and the consumer's in charge, right? So, look, sometimes you don't want too much degrees of freedom because it's hard to manage everything. But in this case, just having that payroll data passportable across multiple different ecosystems opens up this closed loop world that we used to be in. Yeah. Whenever you have closed loop worlds, you have the ability for people to have monopolistic rents, right? You can charge fees at a higher level. So this is ultimately going to only benefit the consumer, and they'll be able then to really participate and spread out that risk premium that they're paying to one institution to either save more or just use that money differently.
Yeah, I think that's a good sum up. I mean, it's really just streamlining it for the consumer, isn't it? Just making the whole process, whether it's buying something on TikTok or their whole banking experience, just making it a lot easier for them. So, well, listen, Dee, thanks so much for coming by and talking to us again. It was great seeing you last year. Great to see you again. And who knows, maybe I'll chat to you again next year.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Enjoy
Dee.
the conference.
Yeah, you too.
Okay.
We really hope you've enjoyed these conversations from Atomic's booth here at Money 2020 Las Vegas at the Venetian.
Don't forget, if you have enjoyed the show, please do give us a positive rating and review. But for now, from me, Russell Goldsmith and Graham Barrett, goodbye.